the outcome of the decision I would reach.
So basically what the senator is saying, recuse yourself from a case that doesn't even exist yet. Like, what is that? What was he expecting there? Let me figure this out. Let me bring in my think tank tonight. Joining us from Gilbert, Arizona, trial attorney Byron Brown is with us, and in Long Beach, California, civil rights attorney Joseph Lowe. Great to have you both here. What am I missing here, Byron? Recusal is you've got some sort of a conflict of interest. Let's start here. The case doesn't even exist yet. It doesn't exist. How can you recuse yourself from a case that doesn't even exist?
You can't, and that's the problem. Like, I'm assuming that senator is most likely a Democrat, most likely isn't a fan of Trump, and what he's trying to do, I believe, is poison the well before the well is even harvested, meaning he's trying to get her to commit to say, hey, listen, the person who's elected you to the Supreme Court, if there's any issue with his reelection, we want you to recuse yourself. The only reason he can be saying that is because he's with Biden and he doesn't like Trump. And it's funny because any other judge-elect to the Supreme Court, if you go back in history, no one's faced the scrutiny that the judges that have been elected by Trump. And this is all political. Judge Coney Barrett is sticking to her morals and her ethics, and I love it. She's not getting angry, and she's answering everything very politely, and she's answering it correctly. You can't recuse yourself for something where you don't even know the facts or circumstances involved. She doesn't know the law, and she'd be doing a disservice to her sister and brethren who are already in the Supreme Court, because part of that, as she articulated, is counseling with them and seeing what their opinion is. And the idea is we put all of these Supreme Justices together and they make a decision about whether someone should be recused or not. And we need to trust the process. This, backyard politics, I want to call it, is confusing everything. And I believe Judge Barrett is someone that should be in the Supreme Court. And I think the answers to all her questions are very polite and very on point. She's a very intelligent lady.
Yeah. All the justices are really smart, and you got to respect that. Joseph, there's got to be a conflict of interest. I mean, the conflict can't be that you are nominated for the Supreme Court by a president and then you can't hear any of those cases, because there have been plenty of cases involving presidents, cases in the Supreme Court, and they've been nominated, and they're, for instance, even with President Trump, Kavanaugh heard cases involving President Trump and the taxes, and there's no it's not a conflict. What's the conflict?
Vinny, you're absolutely right. There's no conflict here. What you're really watching are non-lawyers, many of them, trying to sound like they're lawyers by asking questions that are terrible and really are trying to drum up drama or controversy. And then we scratch our head and like, what is that person even asking and why? Let's get to the bottom of what's really going on here. That senator should have asked the following question. He should have said, if President Trump files some sort of motion to stay in power, because many people believe even if he's not reelected, he's not going anywhere, if that does come to you, will you please step down and not weigh in on it since he just put you on the court? Why didn't you just ask her that? Because that's what everybody wants to know. And what would she have said to that? Well, gosh, I don't know. Plenty of other Supreme Court justices have had similar type conflicts or along the same analysis, and they were able to stay. So her answers are fair and right without being biased. It's because she's saying, look, you were asking me a ridiculous question that I do not have enough facts on, and I'm supposed to analyze those facts and apply them to the law as a justice, and you're asking me not to do that just to say okay or no. That's just ridiculous.
All right. Let's get to now a question that was answered by Judge Amy Coney Barrett regarding the Second Amendment and convicted felons and a decision that she had as a circuit judge. Let's take a listen.
Well, Senator, you referred to gang members and thugs buying guns in Indiana and taking them across the border. And certainly that if they had felony convictions for doing the kinds of things that members of gangs and thugs do, nothing in Cantor says that the government can't deprive them of firearms. And nothing says, in my opinion, that the government can't deprive Ricky Cantor of having firearms. They simply had to make a showing of dangerousness. before they did so. And nothing in the opinion opines at all on the legality of background checks and gun licensing. Those are all separate issues.
So, Joseph, this case was all about a decision. She had a dissenting opinion talking about the fact that, hey, if someone is trying to get a gun permit, they should not be automatically barred by being a convicted felon. You should have a further test to take a look at the nature of the felony that you were convicted of. Was it violent? Do you pose some sort of danger? What are your thoughts about losing a constitutional right for being a convicted felon?
Well, being a constitutional lawyer or a civil rights lawyer, those are very, very precious to me, especially being a former U.S. Marine. And they have an enormous amount of value, especially given the weight or the amount of people who have died, sacrificed their life and limb, and are currently doing so that those rights are current and available to everybody. However, asking her to, again, opine on that, I don't understand it, and here's why. She didn't pass the law. The law currently says that if you get a felony, no matter what it is, you cannot go get a gun. So why ask her what her opinion about that is? Because she's not a senator, she's not a House Republican, she doesn't pass the law. Now, if you're asking me, do I think it's fair that every single felony, no matter what it is, instantly excludes you from owning a gun? I would disagree with that, and I'll say a little bit why. There are many crimes that are felonies that have no even crime, if you will, or aptitude for moral turpitude associated, certainly no violence. And the whole idea behind the law is to make sure that guns do not fall in the hands of violent people because they have poor judgment and they don't know when and when not to use them. So if the states want to look at that a little closer, and if they want to make sure that those rights are available to more people, surely they should be able to do that. And clearly it would be easy to do that. However, what's really going on right now is people are in a hysteria over guns, and politicians just want to capitalize on that fever and that hysteria so that they can get something that they want in exchange for promising something that somebody else wants.
Byron, what do you think about convicted felons? Automatic, you should not have the right to own a gun, or should there be a further test to take a look at the nature of the felony that you were convicted of?
Yeah, this is a line of questioning that Judge Coney Barrett is facing. Reminds me a lot of voir dire. When you're asking juries about their biases and prejudices about whether they can keep an open mind and serve on a jury. And whenever I do that, you ultimately have jurors that are kind of like, you're asking a question in a vacuum without further context. And it's really hard for people to answer those questions. So when these questions come up to Judge Coney Barrett, I think she's doing as good a job as she can. And that's why she's almost adding things in before she answers the question, because ask any lawyer a question, they're going to go, it depends. It depends on the facts. It depends on the parties. It depends on all the facts and circumstances that are particular to that certain case. And so I think she's doing a good job. I do not believe that guns should be banned automatically for every felon, just like anything in the law. I think what we should do is you should take it with a grain of salt. You should look at the facts and circumstances, which I think is what she's saying almost in every question. And then based upon those facts and circumstances, is the person a threat or a danger to society? If it finds that they are, then I think the law is great. Then in that circumstance, the felon shouldn't have a gun. But there has to be a hearing. There has to be some evidence presented for a judge to make a decision. So I think that what the senators are doing, I get it. You got to ask your questions, but you can't ask questions that are in a vacuum without context, because it's just not fair to the person you're asking questions.
Interesting question today, an answer from the judge involving George Floyd. Let's take a listen.
Have you seen the George Floyd video?
I have.
What impact did it have on you?
Senator, as you might imagine, given that I have 2 black children, that was very, very personal for my family. Jesse was with the boys on a camping trip out in South Dakota, so I was there, and my 17-year-old daughter, Vivian, who's adopted from Haiti, all of this was erupting. It was very difficult for her. We wept together, in my room. And then it was also difficult for my daughter Juliet, who's 10. I had to try to explain some of this to them. I mean, my children to this point in their lives have had the benefit of growing up in a cocoon where they have not yet experienced hatred or violence. And for Vivian, you know, to understand that there would be a risk to her brother or the son she might have one day of that kind of brutality has been an ongoing conversation. It's a difficult one for us, like it is for Americans all over the country.
A different question there, Byron. I mean, and you got a different insight into the judge there.
Yeah, a solemn response. I don't know anybody. You hear that response, and as a parent with children and having conversations with them over these topics, especially knowing that her children are African American and that they're adopted, that brings some humanity to her in these questions. This is the first time I heard a question where you kind of got some insight into who really Judge Amy Coney Barrett is. And I think she did a good job with that question. It's hard to be mad at that answer. If you are mad at that answer, then look in the mirror because you're the problem.
Yeah, Joseph, you know, this is a question I wasn't necessarily expecting, and it was really an interesting moment.
Very interesting, and those are some of the questions that should be modeled. That was an outstanding question because it was short, it asked for a narrative, and it asked for how you feel about something and what that's based on as opposed to what you agree with me. And in that moment, you truly got an idea of what that person has been through, their life experience, what influences their decisions. That is another thing that we also do during jury selection. That was an excellent question and an excellent moment, and I actually learned something from it.
Absolutely. All right.
And to Joseph,
go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you, Vinny, but to Joseph's point, that's exactly what I think we all want to see. You want to see who Judge Coney Barrett is, and not all these other questions that obviously have political motives behind it, but let's find out who she is. That's what the whole process is, I thought. Instead, I feel like it's a witch hunt.
Absolutely. All right. When we come back, a professor, his